When I came home from deployment, my parents had sold my medals, rented my room, and let my brother pretend he was the veteran. Until a news crew aired my story with a headline that made my whole family instantly go into hiding when the news van rolled up to the curb in front of my parents' house in Oceanside, I felt my whole body shaking. Not from fear, but from that dead, hollow kind of anger you only get when the people who raised you strip your life down to bones. I stood there in a uniform that didn't feel like mine anymore. No medals, no ribbons, just empty Velcro patches where my service history used to be. The reporter kept asking if I was ready, and I kept saying yes, even though the truth was I hadn't been ready for anything since the moment I walked through my childhood front door 3 weeks earlier. 3 weeks since I came home from my second deployment to find my room rented out on Craigslist. 3 weeks since I saw a stranger's mattress on my floor and my walls scraped bare. 3 weeks since I learned my medals, earned in sweat, mud, and a few nights I still wake up thinking about, had been sold on eBay like they were clutter. My dad crossed his arms and stared at me from the porch, jaw clenched like I was the one who'd ruined his life. "You chose war over us," he said that first night, like it was a line he'd practiced. My mom cried and said she honestly thought I was dead because I stopped calling. Except she blocked my number months earlier after some stupid political argument I can barely remember. And my brother, God, my brother was the one who hit the lowest blow. My car, my checks, my identity, gone. He cashed the deployment checks to keep the family afloat. According to my mom, he drove my car until the brakes screamed. He posted pictures of himself in my uniform, calling himself the returning vet, while strangers thanked him for his service. While they were doing all that, I was sleeping on a busted couch in a guy's garage. Some dude who rented out my old room had a brother with a garage he wasn't using. He tossed me the keys and said, "Make yourself at home," but even he looked guilty saying it. I spent nights eating cold beans from a can, trying to figure out how a family could decide I was disposable. I survived mortar fire, ambushes, and nights where we didn't know if we'd see the sun. But nothing prepared me for being erased by my own blood. The final straw came the day I found my medals online, every single one. Sold by username PacificDad75, which I recognized instantly. My father's fishing handle. Seeing the listing descriptions felt like getting punched in the throat. Light wear. Good condition. Authentic. I called the news because I didn't know what else to do. I didn't have money for a lawyer. I didn't have a home. I didn't even have proof of anything except screenshots and the kind of rage that makes your vision go sharp at the edges. The reporter asked me, "What do you hope happens after we air this?" I said the first honest thing that came to my mind. I just want my life back. But as the camera light flipped on and the microphone came up under my chin, I saw something through the window of my parents' house. Something that made my stomach drop so fast I thought I might actually be sick. It wasn't my dad. It wasn't my mom. It wasn't even my brother. It was someone I thought I'd never see again. And that's when everything cracked open. I guess to really understand how all of this went sideways, you need to know what my family was like before deployment twisted everything into knots. We weren't perfect, but we weren't supposed to be the kind of family that turned on each other like wolves. We lived in a 2-story house in Oceanside, 10 minutes from Camp Pendleton. Mom worked at a dental office. Dad was a contractor who talked big about supporting the troops, which mostly meant grilling burgers at neighborhood block parties and telling everyone how proud he was that his son was a Marine. Growing up, I thought that pride was real. I thought my brother, Nate, looked up to me. He used to ask to try on my uniform blouse when I came home from boot camp. I thought it was cute. I didn't realize he was already obsessed with the attention it brought. When I left for my second deployment, things still felt normal enough. Mom hugged me too tight. Dad gave me that heavy clap on the back he always used to give when he didn't know how to show affection. Nate joked about keeping my room warm, and we all laughed. If someone had told me that within a year I'd come back to find strangers sleeping in that room, I would have thought they were insane. But things cracked before I even left the country. My family had started arguing about politics. Loud, exhausting fights where every opinion became a personal attack. I tried to stay neutral, but one night I snapped at my mom after she said something careless about People who choose violent jobs. She blocked my number for a week. Later, she said she forgot to unblock it. Still, I shipped out thinking we'd work it out once I was home. That's what you do. You push the noise down and focus on survival. Deployment was rough. Not the worst the Corps ever sent me on, but enough to leave a few scars I don't like to talk about. Enough to make you think hard about the people you love because you don't know if you'll get back to them in one piece. I emailed my family when I could. Got short replies, sometimes none. I figured they were busy. I figured everything would be fine. The day I landed back in California, I turned my phone on expecting messages. Welcome home. When do we pick you up? Something. Anything. Nothing. I took an Uber straight to the house. I didn't bother texting. I wanted to see their faces. I wanted to surprise them. Instead, I was the one surprised. I remember walking into the house and smelling lemon cleaner. The place was spotless in a way it never was when I lived there. My old bedroom door was half open. I pushed it wider and saw a bed I didn't recognize. Posters on the wall I'd never seen. A duffel bag. Shoes. A girl's pink hoodie. A couple I'd never met froze when they saw me. Are you the landlord's son?" the woman asked. My father came down the hall like I was the intruder. "You can't just barge in here," he said. I was speechless. "I live here," I finally said. "Not anymore," he answered. The whole truth unraveled in pieces. My room had been rented out for nearly 6 months. My stuff boxed, stored, misplaced, then sold. My military mail had been opened, checks cashed, car driven, identity worn like a costume. But even then, the thing I saw through the window the day the news crew arrived didn't make sense. It didn't fit. It shouldn't have been possible. And it was the one thing that tied all of this to something darker than money or pride or neglect. The thing I saw through the window that day, the thing that made my stomach twist, was the edge of a familiar backpack. Not just any backpack. My deployment pack. The one I lost during a convoy scramble overseas. The one I was told was never recovered. It was propped against the hallway wall like someone had just set it down. Same scuffs. Same torn strap. Same marker initials I wrote the night before we shipped out. I'd stared at photos of myself wearing that pack in group shots. I knew every inch of it. So seeing it sitting casually in my parents' house, it felt like stepping into some kind of hallucination. But I couldn't react. The camera was rolling. My parents were watching. And the reporter was talking like she didn't feel the ground shifting under her feet. After the interview, when the news crew left, I tried to push past my dad into the house. "I need to see something," I said. "You're not welcome here," he replied, blocking the doorway. I told him I saw the pack. He said I was imagining things. Gaslighting with the kind of confidence only someone who's been rehearsing can pull off. That night, back on the couch in the garage, I couldn't stop replaying every detail. Why was the pack here? Who brought it? How did they get it? Why hide it? Something no longer added up in the timeline. My stuff wasn't just sold off carelessly. Someone was selecting what stayed and what disappeared. Over the next week, the situation kept escalating. First, Nate, my brother, started blowing up my phone. Not to apologize, not to explain, but to beg me not to let the news station air the story. "You don't understand what this will do to us," he said. "To you, you mean?" I shot back. He hung up on me. Then my mom came to the garage unannounced. She brought a grocery bag of food and cried so hard I almost felt bad. Almost. She kept saying, "You don't know what your father's been dealing with." But every time I asked what she meant, she'd clam up and say she made promises. Promises to who? Meanwhile, people online started messaging me because they recognized Nate from his fake veteran posts. Screenshots came in. Him giving interviews to small local podcasts pretending he had PTSD from a night raid. Him taking free meals from veteran-only events. Him picking up girls by telling them he'd lost friends overseas. He even got a free tattoo dedicated to fallen soldiers. Names of people he had never met. Names of guys I served with. By day 8, the pressure got so bad I couldn't breathe without feeling like something was going to crack. So I walked back to the house at 2 a.m., planning to confront whoever had my gear. The street was dead quiet. Porch lights off. Curtains drawn. I slipped around the side of the house the way I used to when I missed curfew as a teenager. When I reached the back window, the one that looked into the hallway, I saw movement. A shadow. Then the light flicked on. Standing there in the hallway with my deployment pack open on the floor was my father. But he wasn't alone. Someone else was kneeling beside him. Someone I never thought I'd see alive again. Someone who shouldn't have been in Oceanside, because they were supposed to be thousands of miles away. Or buried. And the second I recognized the outline of their face, my chest went cold. Because this was the real beginning of everything. The person kneeling beside my father. The face I thought I'd never see again. The reason my breath caught in my throat. It was Corporal Mason Hale. My former teammate. My roommate overseas. My friend. My ghost. Because Mason Hale was supposed to be dead. We were told he died during that convoy scramble, the same one where my pack went missing. The same one where everything turned into smoke and sand and screaming. We saw the body bag get loaded. We got the official word. I wrote his mother a letter that took me 3 hours to finish because I kept crying every time I tried to describe what a good man he'd been. And there he was, alive, in my parents' hallway, opening my deployment pack like he never missed a step. For a moment, my brain actually refused to process it. I felt my knees go weak, and I had to grip the siding of the house to stay upright. My first thought wasn't anger. It was relief. This wild, stupid, overwhelming relief that he was alive. But then everything snapped into clarity. Why was he here? Why hadn't he contacted me? Why did he have my pack? Why were he and my father acting like partners in a secret? I must have made a sound, because my dad's head jerked toward the window. He shot up, panic flashing across his face. Who's out there? I ran. Instinct took over, same instinct that kept me alive overseas. I sprinted down the side yard, vaulted the fence, disappeared into the neighbor's bushes, and didn't stop until my lungs burned. Back in the garage, I paced for an hour straight. My thoughts spiraled. Was Mason undercover? Was my dad involved in something illegal? Were they using my identity? Was Nate involved too? But the biggest question kept punching me in the throat. Why didn't Mason tell me he was alive? The next morning, I went back to the house. This time in daylight, this time pretending I hadn't seen anything. My dad answered the door like nothing was wrong. What do you want? He asked. To talk, I said. He wouldn't meet my eyes. Your mother isn't home. I didn't ask for Mom. For the first time since this whole nightmare started, I pushed my way inside. He didn't stop me. Maybe he was too tired. Maybe he thought keeping quiet would keep everything contained. I looked down the hallway. The pack was gone. No sign Mason had ever been there. Dad? I said. I know what I saw. He froze. Hands trembling. Jaw twitching. You weren't supposed to find out this way, he muttered. Find out what exactly? He wouldn't say. He just kept repeating. You don't understand. You don't understand. I was done playing soft. Where's Mason? He didn't react. Didn't breathe. Didn't blink. But his eyes flicked, just once, toward the storage closet at the end of the hall. I walked toward it. He followed. Don't open that, he said, voice cracking. I opened it. It wasn't locked. And it didn't hold what I expected. Inside the closet was a stack of boxes, my boxes, stuff I thought had been sold or trashed. But on top of the stack was something worse. A folder. Government stamped. My unit's insignia. My last deployment log. And a printed report titled, Hale, Mason, Status. Classified. I looked at my father. He whispered, Please don't make me explain this. But before I could demand answers, the front door opened. Nate walked in. Behind him, limping, pale, very much alive, stood Mason Hale himself. And Mason looked at me with an expression I had never seen on his face before. An expression that said, I'm not here by accident. And you're not going to like why. Mason stared at me like he was sizing up an enemy, not greeting an old friend. His eyes weren't the same ones I remembered from late-night watch rotations or dumb card games in the barracks. These were colder. calculating, like he'd rehearsed this moment. Nate shut the door behind them and immediately stepped between us, like he thought I might attack. "You weren't supposed to come back here," he said. The way he said "here" made my skin crawl, like this house didn't belong to me anymore. I kept my eyes on Mason. "You want to start talking?" I asked. He didn't answer. Instead, he glanced toward my father, like he was waiting for permission. Dad finally sighed. The kind of sigh people make when they know the truth is going to blow everything up. "You were never supposed to know Mason was alive." For a second, the world stopped spinning. "Why?" I whispered. "Why the hell would you hide that from me?" The answer didn't come from my father. It came from Mason. "Because your family needed something from me," he said, voice low. And I agreed. Nate shifted, guilt buzzing off him like heat. Dad wouldn't look up. Mom wasn't even home, conveniently. I felt that cold, hollow anger again. What did they need? No one answered. That's when something inside me clicked. A different version of me stepped forward, the version shaped by deployment, by loss, by nights trying to keep people alive in chaos. The version that didn't hesitate. "If you're not going to tell me," I said, "I'll make you." I walked out of the house before any of them could react. But not because I was scared. Because I needed distance. I needed clarity. And I needed a plan. I went straight to the only place that had given me a roof the last few weeks. That garage. I shut the door behind me, sat on the old couch, and let everything line up in my head. Pieces were falling into place. Not all of them, but enough to feel the shape of something bigger. Here's what I knew. Mason was alive. My family hid that. My pack, the one lost during the convoy, was in their house. My deployment logs were in that closet, marked classified for a soldier who was declared dead. They'd taken my money, my room, my car, my identity. They were trying to keep the news from airing. And Mason, for whatever reason, was working with them. But the worst realization? Everything they'd done, the selling, the lying, the erasing, suddenly didn't feel like the main plot. They weren't bold enough for that. This wasn't their idea. Someone else was driving this. Someone who had leverage. Someone trained. Someone who used to be my brother-in-arms. I stared at the garage ceiling and let the anger settle into something sharper. Purpose. If they weren't going to tell me the truth, I'd drag it out myself. And I'd do it the same way we handled intel overseas. Quietly. Methodically. Without blinking. Step 1, track the money. Step 2, track Mason. Step 3, find the weak link. And step 4, flip the whole operation upside down. Because whatever this was, whatever my family and Mason were tangled in, I knew one thing deep in my bones: they underestimated me. They thought I'd roll over. They thought deployment had broken me. But I'd survived far worse men than them. And I was ready to take everything back. And I had no idea that the next step, step 1, would uncover a twist so insane, so personal, that it would change the whole story. Step 1 was supposed to be simple: track the money. Follow the paper trail. Figure out where my checks went and who cashed them. I thought I'd find a forged signature, a fake account, maybe my brother using my ID at some sketchy check cashing place. But what I found instead cracked this whole thing open in a way I did not see coming. I went to the credit union on base the next morning. I still had my military ID, even if my brother had paraded around with my uniform. The teller pulled up my account and frowned. "That's strange," she said. "Your checks were deposited into a joint account." "Joint with who?" She turned her screen toward me. My father's name was on it. But so was Mason Hale's. Not only that, the account wasn't 6 months old like I expected. It had been opened a year before Mason died. I felt the floor tilt. "Can you print the last year of transactions?" I asked. She did. Every deposit from my deployment went straight into that joint account. But the withdrawals? They weren't random grocery store runs or household expenses. They were structured, deliberate. Tools from hardware stores, high-end cameras, camping gear, storage unit fees, a burner phone company. Payments to someone listed only as V. Hale, and then there was the last transaction, a $7,200 withdrawal 3 weeks before I came home. Cash. Signed by my father. Countersigned by Mason. My chest tightened. None of this was about bills. They were funding something. Something planned. Something hidden. When I stepped outside the bank, the sunlight felt too bright. Too sharp. Like the world was trying to warn me. I called my mom. She answered on the first ring, voice shaky. "Please stop digging," she whispered. "Why is Mason tied to our finances? I can't talk about this. What are you all involved in?" A long, broken silence. Then she whispered, "Your father made a choice. Nate followed him. Mason had no choice at all. Please, don't make them desperate." "Desperate for what?" I demanded. But she hung up before she answered. That was when I realized something terrifying. This wasn't some sloppy family scheme. This wasn't about greed. This wasn't even about stealing my identity. This was organized, coordinated, structured like a damn operation. And the deeper I dug, the worse it got. I went to the storage unit listed on the bank statement. I expected boxes, maybe stolen gear, maybe stuff they hadn't sold yet. But when I opened the unit, it was almost empty. One folding table, a ring light, 2 chairs facing each other, and pinned to the wall photos. Photos of me, dozens of them. Screenshots of my social media, deployment pictures, clips from base newsletters, my high school yearbook photo. Across the center of the wall was a taped outline of a storyboard. Headlines, possible titles, notes, veteran returns home to shocking betrayal, stolen identity, family downfall, exclusive interview, inside the home of a Marine. I stood there, staring, breath strangled in my throat. They weren't stealing my life. They were building something out of it. A narrative, a performance, a story. A story where I was the tragic main character, but they were the ones controlling the script. And right in the center of the storyboard, circled in red, was a note in my father's handwriting. Phase 3. The reunion reveal. Film with Mason present. That's when the truth hit me like a punch to the ribs. They didn't just hide Mason from me. They didn't just sell my stuff. They didn't just take my identity. They were creating something. Production. A lie big enough to ruin me or make them rich, maybe both. And I realized with sickening clarity. The reason they panicked when the news crew showed up wasn't because I'd exposed their betrayal. It was because I'd interrupted their script. I stood in that storage unit, staring at the wall of photos and headlines, feeling like I'd stumbled into some low-budget true crime documentary. Except I was the victim and my own family was the production team. And that's when the dread finally settled in. Not panic, not confusion, just a cold, creeping understanding that everything had been leading to something far darker than financial desperation or petty envy. My family wasn't trying to destroy me. They were trying to use me, package me, sell me, for profit, for clout, for a story they thought the world would eat up. I backed toward the door, but before I could slip out, someone stepped into the light. Mason. He didn't look angry or scared or guilty. He looked exhausted, like he'd been carrying a secret so heavy it warped the way he stood. "You weren't supposed to see this yet," he said quietly. "Yet?" I spit back. "You people writing seasons now?" He didn't flinch. He stepped inside and shut the door. And then he told me everything. Every rotten detail. Every cold, calculated piece. And I swear, I have never felt more sick in my life. It started a year before that convoy attack. My dad caught wind of a man online who made thousands filming reconciliation documentaries about broken families. Staged fights, emotional returns, dramatic reveals, fake reality, fake trauma, millions of views, sponsorships, donations. And my dad, who'd always cared more about admiration than actual connection, decided he wanted in. But he didn't have a story big enough, not tragic enough, not marketable enough, until he heard I'd be deploying again. And that's when it clicked for him. My absence, my service, my vulnerability. I wasn't his son anymore. I was material, a narrative goldmine. So he recruited Nate, who loved attention the way some people love oxygen, and sold him on the idea of becoming the supportive brother in a viral documentary. He recruited my mom by telling her it would bring the family back together. But Mason got pulled in the hardest way, because he really did almost die in that convoy scramble. He was evacuated unconscious, in critical condition. He woke up in a private military medical ward 2 weeks later, confused, disoriented, under strict orders not to contact anyone until an internal investigation finished. And that's when my father visited him. I still don't know how he got access, but Mason explained it like this. He told me you'd been told I died. He said it was easier that way. He said when I was discharged, he'd help me get back on my feet. But I had to help him first. Help him how? By staying dead. By staying hidden. By helping them build the perfect story of betrayal and redemption. A story they planned to launch as a docu-series. With interviews, teasers, merch, sponsors lined up. And the twist they'd been saving. They wanted to film a moment where I discovered Mason was still alive. On camera. Raw. Real. Shareable. They were going to turn my trauma into content. Not metaphorically. Literally. Down to the beats. Down to the script. Down to the exact emotions they wanted from me. I felt something in my chest crack. Something old and soft and hopeful. It died right there. Because I realized this wasn't neglect or stupidity or panic. This was cruelty. Cold. Deliberate. Calculated. Performed. My father wasn't a broken man. He wasn't confused. He wasn't overwhelmed. He was ambitious. And he didn't see me as his son. He saw me as the main character in a show he could profit from. And the worst part? Mason stepped forward, voice barely above a whisper. I owed him, he said. He paid my medical debt. He said if I didn't help him, he'd tell the Corps I deserted. I stared at him, horrified. You didn't desert. I know, he said. But he said he had the paperwork to make it look like I did. My father had orchestrated everything. Not out of desperation. Not out of fear. But out of simple, chilling, hungry ambition. And now that I knew the truth, Mason swallowed hard and added. He said if you got in the way, he had a plan for that too. I stepped back. What plan? He didn't answer. But his silence told me enough. My father wasn't done using me. Not even close. And that was the moment I knew revenge wasn't optional. It was survival. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in that garage on the threadbare couch, staring at the ceiling, letting the rage settle into cold, surgical precision. This wasn't about shouting or breaking things. This wasn't about punching my brother or screaming at my parents. This was about dismantling them piece by piece and making sure the world knew exactly what they were capable of. Step 1 was obvious. I called the news crew back. But this time, I didn't just talk. I handed over everything. Screenshots, bank statements, copies of emails, photos of Nate in my uniform posing as me, screenshots of the online posts he'd made claiming my service, the classified deployment logs from the storage unit. Every piece of proof I'd been gathering since the moment I realized my life had been stolen. Step 2. I staged a confrontation, but on my terms. I walked into my parents' house during a weekday, confident, collected. I had all the cameras rolling this time, but they were mine. I recorded every word, every half apology from my mother, every defensive excuse from my father, every guilty smirk from Nate. Step 3. I exposed Mason too. I forced him to speak on camera, not as a co-conspirator, but as someone caught between obligation and morality. His voice cracked, his body leaned toward the camera, and he told the story exactly as it happened. The threats, the money, the docu-series plans. Step 4. I let the story breathe. I went to local news stations, posted clips online, contacted veteran advocacy groups. By the time the first segment aired, Oceanside was buzzing. People who had applauded my brother online were calling him out. Veteran charities started retracting donations. Sponsors pulled funding. Social media lit up with outrage. My parents? They became a local cautionary tale. Interviews were requested, but they refused. They looked helpless on the street when neighbors and old friends whispered about what had been uncovered. Their plan to monetize my trauma backfired spectacularly. They had underestimated one thing. I wasn't just the victim. I was also the one with proof, and I wasn't afraid to use it. Nate tried to play the victim for a week. Mason refused to stay silent. My dad tried to salvage what was left of his reputation by blaming everyone but himself. And my mom, she finally admitted, tearfully, that she'd gone along with it because she thought it would keep the family together. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just watched. And I realized something profound in that moment. I'd survived war overseas. I'd survived betrayal at home. I'd survived being erased. And now I was finally free. The garage couch was gone the next week. I reclaimed my old room, refurnished it, and put every medal back in its rightful place. Not as a display for anyone else, but as a reminder of what I'd endured and what I had taken back. Before I left for a long run along the coastline, I took one last look at my parents' house. The blinds were drawn. The yard was empty. They were left with the story they had tried to script, only now the world saw it the way I wanted. And me? I felt lighter than I had in months. Anger still simmered, but it was mine to control. I wasn't a pawn anymore. I stepped onto the street, inhaled the salty air, and laughed quietly to myself. Not out of humor exactly, not even relief, because the truth is, they thought they could sell my life. They thought they could profit from my pain. They forgot one thing. You don't mess with a Marine who's already survived hell and come back for more. And that, my friends, is how you turn betrayal into victory.